Hello, hello, please. Can I address the chair, please? I'm CJ in this room.
Hi, what's the concern?
Hello. You can hear me, right?
Yup, you're audible.
Okay. Please, I'm CG in the room, and my partner unfortunately would not be available, so I'll be Iron Manning this round if that's okay.
Yup, that's okay. I would also advise all debaters to like input their speaker name and position in the
You
text
said
channel what to input. Yup, so
I didn't
closing
hear
off.
that, please.
I'm sorry.
You said I didn't hear that.
Ah, that's fine that you're going to do Iron Man. No worries.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
As for the other debaters, could everyone input their speaker name and position in the text channel so that I know what to input in regards to Tabikat?
So I should put it in the text space, right?
Yup.
Okay.
I'm still waiting for the confirmation of the speaker positions for opening gov, opening up, and closing opposition. Would you type it down in the text space panel 5? All right, cool. So opening up an OG is here, but it would be nice to also state your speaker position. So that means I would know who will be a ranking or who will be scoring for PM. So for example, input PM, would it be Lucky or would it be Destiny? The same goes for op and closing opposition. So I provided an example in the text channel just for just for clarity. Yep. Thank you. Thank you, opening gov. So I think we're waiting for opening opposition and closing opposition to also like indicate their speaker name and position. So I think we're just waiting for opening of a session to input theirs. All right, got that opening of a session. So I think everyone's here and complete as a sign of their attendance. So we can now start the debate. So hi guys, I'm Sam. I'll be your chair for round one of the Deck Open season two. So debating on the motion about environmental movements should actively embrace climate philanthropy. Few reminders before we start the debate. One, before you start your speech, please state your preferred POI and pronoun preference so that debaters would know how to raise one POI to you. Secondly, would be like follow equity rules and policies just to make this debate fun and less conflict and stuff like that. Cool. Calling on Prime Minister to start the debate. You're here.
Okay, Pan, I confirm if you can hear me.
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, so I'm not timing myself, but I'll be looking at the text piece for my time. And then secondly, my POI, if you have POI, you can ask via the text piece. I'll be looking at the screen. So just ask your POI then, like just drop your POI then. I'll take you if I want to take. Like, okay, shoot. I think that is cool. So, Pane, assuming I'm still audible, I'll be starting my speech in three, two, one. So the world globally is aiming to see how we can reduce carbon and other harmful emission to zero, right? But the problem we have in status quo is that we live in a world where third world countries still prioritize their economic growth over any environmental sustainability that anybody would ever narrate, right? Because they feel like it is always better for them to take care of their citizens. Apart from taking care of their citizens, they need the funds that come from these resources. They need the money over any environmental sustainability that anybody wants to preach to them, right? So what this now looks like is that the first world country who have kind of been able to self-sustain even without using these resources are now the one who are kind of pushing or who are kind of fighting for these space, right? And now the one who are even fighting to see how we can actually cut this things. But the third world countries are not even playing any major role that they are supposed to be playing in these things, right? Because of this, concern has been raised, and now we now have environmental movements, which could be socially, philosophically, or in any other perspective, to see how we can actually foster an ideology, to see how we can actually sustain our environment so that this our environment will not really deplete forever, right? So there's a general consensus from both sides of the house in today's motion that we should actually embrace climate philanthropy, right? Whether from the opposition side or from the government side, we actually agree that we should embrace climate philanthropy. Where this debate now lies is the fact that we are trying, is the manner in which we are trying to do this, right? From our side, we tell you that we should engage this in active manner. This is to say, we'll do it actively, within our strength, within our efforts, the social movements, to see how we are going to engage this climate philanthropy. But what the opposition's side are or stand to argue to this motion is even if we want to like engage these guys, we should not even try to like kind of make it in such a way that is going to be an active right. Now, preemptive reporter, I don't want opposition to start saying that our engaging these guys actively means that the government will not be playing their role again. We think that is lie because the fact that we still engage this guy does not mean that the government do not have the role that are going to play, right? But it just means that the efforts that we have in status quo, where we actually involve government, we rely on UN policies and so is not what is going to hold, right? But what we are going to put more effort on now is on how we can engage these climate philanthropy. So the question is, what does this climate philanthropy even look like? So it looks like individuals or corporate organizations or even capitalists that actually put their interest, their resources to see how they can actually foster the development of a sustainable plan for the environment, right? So these guys are willing to actually put their effort, and so many other things, which could be technologically, let's say in terms of what they are, the kind of innovation that they are doing, which could be financially, let's say by donating to programs that actually help these things and otherwise, vice versa, right? So we believe in our side that it is better for us to engage them actively. So to the extent that my speech is able to show you that our house is better than what actually exists in status quo, which I think the opposition side might want to be defending in today's motion, we stand to win. Like so, panel, let's engage status. What does status quo look like? What does status quo look like? Like as I've already showed you in the opening speech, that there's this kind of economic progress disparity that actually exists in the status quo, which is making the first world country to be the one who actually fostering economic development, while the third world country like Africa, India, China, and so many other countries are not engaging actively in this kind of force. What this now looks like is when the UN agrees to like set sustainability goals, let's say Vision 2030, that there will be zero emission and so many other stuff. It's people agree, everybody agree, but at the end of the day, we do not see how these things are being acted out. Why? Because agreeing to something doesn't mean that it will be carried out, which means that there is need for us to channel our strength to other alternatives that actually exist that actually exists within our confinement. What this looks like is okay if currently in this world we have policies that we're actually putting in place to make sure that governments are going to react to how to make the environment more sustainable, but they are not doing it. From our side of the house, we believe it is better for us to actually change our direction and put it majorly on these climate philanthropies, which we think it is better. Two reasons why we believe in this. First of all, it's on the case of sustainability, right? And then the second thing is about ideological purity that actually exists in terms of why in the first place should we even be pushing for economic for climate sustainability, right? Our worst case scenario is that okay, if we actually push these guys, I will feel like okay, if we push or we channel our energy towards these guys being the one to take care, being the one to actually be more like the pillars of fighting this of of fostering this sustainability, then government policies might actually be the next thing which is going to frustrate us. So what this looks like is opposition will take that. In our worst case scenario, if we live in a country where the government do not buy into the ideology of this sustainability, that it will make us to kind of not be able to have that energy that we're supposed to, not to be able to have what we're supposed like the ability, because governments might likely frustrate us with their policies. But we think that is even better because there are color culture, and apart from color culture, it now actually shows that these governments are the one who are against our whatever we are doing. So on idea of sustainability, we believe that if we get this thing from the philanthropy, from the climate philanthropy actively, we believe it is better sustainable because we don't have things like government where maybe after 4 years a government will, and that is in their way. And at the end of the 4 years, we now have something like okay, because let's say the person that was in power has left, and this next person that comes to power does not even want to like involve actively on this. We don't have that in our world. Like what happened in America when Donald Trump came to power, we didn't even want to have anything involved in this kind of climate sustainability. We don't get it in our world. And then the next thing is about the ideological purity of climate change. We think that in what we exist in status quo is government trying to show or just trying to see how they can actually use their kind of power or powers politically to kind of show themselves to the world that we are good, we are moving towards sustaining the economy, towards sustaining the climate. But in our world, that is not what you get because this. We believe that our people are the ones that actually do this thing rather than the government without any side. Never be so far.
All right. Thank you for that, PM. To open the clash, that's called Leader of Opposition. You're here.
Am I audible?
Yup.
Okay. Thank you. Give me a sec. Okay. So I will be starting in 3, 2, 1. Okay, panel. We think like on our side, it's important that we characterize exactly what actively, like what's not actively pursuing climate change philanthropy is going to look like, right? We don't think like this means that we're not going to take any money from anybody, right? That's something that we are not saying. What we are basically saying, right, is that we're not going to frame it as the major thing, right? The major way of contributing to this climate change active. Like it's basically something like this thing is open, right? We're not pushing for it. If in the event that you do want to add money to this, we think you can, or we think this is not the biggest way you can contribute to like helping climate change, right? We think that these and these are the more important things. These are the things you're actively telling you to do, right? So we think that is exactly what not actively playing a role is, right? Saying this is not a major source of of the fight for climate change and pursuing and it's like basically expanding other options, right? What are the other options you are going to page, right? The first thing is actually working on your carbon emissions and stuff like that, right? And we think it's something that's especially important to the main actors in this debate, right? Who are actually going to be doing most of this philanthropy, right? Once like opposition, we think that people, the biggest people, you would have the biggest incentive, right, to actively contribute to philanthropy for this climate change activists, right, are the people that are actively contributing to climate change in the status quo, right? Basically, people that are doing loads of pollution, right? Basically, like being the biggest contributors to climate change activists, right? Because they have the incentive to do so. These people want basically to like push public narrative that they're actually, helping climate activists, they're helping climate change, when in truth, they are spoiling the environment, right? We think on like opposition, this is the main thing we are trying to avoid, right? We do not want to give agency to these people that are actively harming government, right? By basically saying like, by just like allowing them to donate, right? Because we don't think that those donations, right, in the long run are going to solve the problem of climate change, right, especially for those places, right? So we think on all these classes on sustainability, right, we think we win on that, right? Because we think our solution basically is sustainable, basically going to bring to you this debate, right? So rebuttals to what we get from opening opposition, right? The first thing we see, right, is that the fundamental basis, right, of climate change, like one of the fundamental people that are pushing climate change and pollution and status quo, right, are the group of people that basically do all the polluting, right? We think that even if we do have money, right, we don't think that all these like distribution is especially going to fly, especially like how you engage developing countries, right? Because we think in these developing countries, what you're essentially going to have is these people donating like small amounts of money, or like relatively like compared to the profits they are making, right? Because understanding people are business, like they're going on the capitalist incentive, right? Compared to the amount of money they are making, right? Going to need a small percentage to this business, right? And I'm basically going to have the pass for the entire, like by the citizens of the place, right? Which are supposed to be the people that basically give the natural checks for these people, right? And basically, lobbying against them and protest and stuff like that to get these people to stop going like pursuing, stop basically polluting the environment, right? We think we lose that. And we think to the fact that we actually don't stop pollution, right? Because these people are going to continue to pollute. We don't think we actually get any change on God's side. We think like, that their point basically doesn't stand. So how exactly do we give these people agency, right? We think the first thing we do when we actively collect the money that they give us, right, is that we push the narrative that they played their part in the fight for climate change, right, when they are still active polluters, right? And we think that basically drives natural checks in society that from polluting in the first place, right? We think the alternative on that opportunity to this debate is to say we think fundamentally, right, you are still a polluter of the environment, right? And we are going to continue to actively go against you and against the things you do, regardless of whether or not you give this money, right? We think giving this money is not important to us, it's not as important to us as actively stopping um, environmental pollution in the status quo, right? We think that's exactly what is in today's debate. We think to the extent that pollution continues, right, then the fundamental problem of climate change has not been solved. So we don't think that this is going to solve any problems, right? Is doing this going to be more sustainable, right? The first thing, right, is that we don't give the excuse, we don't basically give people the excuse that money can, we think we actively go for the problem, right, this climate change. We think we engage with these companies that actively pollute, right? Because understand that in government's world, they continue to pollute, right? But on our side, we basically say, no, you're a polluter. It doesn't matter how much money you pay, we're still going to continue to pollute, because we don't think that the donations that these people are going to make are going to substantially affect the amount of pollutions they have in status quo, right? This is going to be a power play to make sure that the people and the environment, right, that would normally protest against them and things they do think they're contributing towards climate change. We don't want to give them the opening to do that in our world. We think basically we solve the problem of emissions, right? Because we basically give these people incentives to actually address their issues, right? We don't give them the quick out option to just donate to us and leave. We think we engage with these problems in the status quo, right? We think the main burden of this debate is on where you best engage with climate change. I think on that basis, right? On the basis that we give you the most sustainable solution, right? Solution where these people actually combat with the problems that are actively causing climate change in the status quo, right? And the extent that we push the narrative that these people are the polluters, right? And people should not excuse them because they have money or because they're donating, and actively protest against the things that they're doing, because we're not going to just take their money, right? We think we put a stand that actively solves problems of climate change in status quo, right? So we think that we engage the main points of the debate, right, on how we best engage with climate change. We think on side opposition, we have the most sustainable solution, and we should win this debate. Proud to propose here.
All right, cool. Thank you for that, leader of opposition. Now to open or to support the case of OG, let's call DPM. Here.
Okay. Hania, I hope you can hear me. And I'm going to be starting my speech in three. Hania, first, the motion of this debate that the House believes that environmental movements should actively embrace climate philanthropy. And yes, the PM has actually framed the debate in the context and in the manner in which it should go, trying to tell us that philanthropists are just kind of people who reach out to others in order to give them related initiatives, build support networks, invest with the climate first lines, and also use their influence to pushing climate changes. Now, what we get from the leader of the opposition was where they are making the case scenario look like it is the philanthropists or the climate philanthropy that are the ones that spoil the narrative or anything concerning our environmental movement. But this is not the motion of the debate. Our PM has already showed you in this speech that climate philanthropy includes using technologies and finance, etc. We can talk about the Tesla electric cars and all of that. Our climate philanthropists are not just capitalists who are depleting the economy or the environmental movement, but there are people who are there to show their embrace and reach out to multiplicity of people. Now, panel, I'm going to be arguing in 4 nuances, and then I'm going to give you 4 strategies why our philanthropists can positively influence the environmental movement as a whole. First, they have the ability also to shaping the political environment and also our environmental movement, because these philanthropists here are people that are incorporated in the society and would have different kind of how I put connections and things to be used in doing the society, so they can be able to come up with the political ecology or economy of the society in order for them to like outstretch their hands to make this climate, to make this environmental movement to be actively embraced and then actively engaged. Now also we talk about the fact that there are boundary spanners, that's there are players between, or they go through different field building actions. That is to say that these philanthropists are not just in a particular space. They are experts in different fields, and they can be able to bring in all their expertise skills in order for them to be able to help this environmental movement grow. Now, in status quo, it seems as though that our governments are not even working in this side of our society. That is why we have different kind of things still happening in our society. And then, if this government cannot actively participate, then why don't we engage? Why don't we engage the use another method or another opting out method by actively embracing the climate philanthropy. Also, they can influence market dynamics through a well-targeted investment. Yes, it is true that the climate philanthropists can be able to they can be able to help us in our market dynamics through well-targeted investment, as it is already self-explained. And also they can be able to contribute to build strong and a civil society movement through the grassroots by organization. This is to say that these our philanthropists will be able to know and feel the pains of people, because there are also people in the society. They are not like the government who feels that, oh, they can do anything they cannot do. But these people are the ones also in this society, and they know what is best for them. So when they come out to be able to do this for the growth and development of our country or any other country as relating to, then it shows us that they are better persons to be able to do this. Now we'll talk about what the environmental movement is all about. The environmental movement has also to do with our ecological movement, also including like philosophical, social, and political movement for addressing environmental issues. Also panel, our worst case scenario, as our PM has already said, is that the opposition may be able to say that they will not be able to influence, we may not be able to influence the status quo because of government policy, and may not be able to infiltrate or enter into the government status. We may not be able to operate because of the policy of the government. This is because governments may be the like autonomous body, but then we tell them that it is better that these philanthropists in their own way are able to promote environment, as governments may not be able to carry out this same promotion because of their selfish interests. Governments have different vesting plans, they have different schedules, they have different budgets in which they may want to put in their money. So when the government do not do this thing, the leader of the opposition did not answer the question that when the government leaves, then what should happen if nobody actively participates in a particular way in order for this environmental change or movement to be brought in? Then what will happen to the environmental? That is to say that there will be nothing in the society, in and of itself. And now, in our comparative analysis between our world and their world, it is true that their world may be good because of the way that they can interchange and they can be able to do whatever thing they want to do, choose whether to do this or to not do that. But in our world, we find out that there is sustainability in our world. That is to say that we already know that this particular set of people are the people that are in charge of this environmental movement and growth in our society. And that is to say that that is the reason why these people will be able to sustain our country, and they'll be able to sustain environmental policy in our country. And now we also talk about the fact of organization and orderliness. Now, panel, it is important for you all to note that in our own side of the world, there would be orderliness and there will be organization. This is to say that we already know that this kind of people are the people that are actively participating in the environmental policy or in the environmental movement. And yes, they may be held responsible with certain actions or inactions in which they take. But then when it comes to the government, governments may not really be held responsible, even if the people have their cries and all of that, uproars and all of that. The government will still do what is best for them and what is beneficial to them. And also we talk about the fact of ideological purity. So panel, the leader of the opposition, the leader of the opposition said that why they also say that they don't think about they don't buy our stance or our debates because of donation. They said that the donation will not be able to help in the long run, and they do not want to be actively engaged. And they talked about the fact of excuse. But panel, I feel that excuses exist in both sides of the world, in our world and in their world. But ours is better because the excuse that may come up, there are different kind of philanthropists and there are different people. So even if one person makes excuse, the other person may be able to come in to do this. But in their own side of the world, when the government or anybody feels like a testicle about their attitude, then there is nothing that can be done. So Pane, I know I have been able to show you like 4 reasons why our world is better than their world. We are able to also run a comparative analysis, and I've also been able to give you 4 strategies that a philanthropist can use in positively to influence our environment and our society. So, panel, I feel that with these few points of mine, I'm able to, and I not just feel, I know that with these few points, I'm able to tell you everything, and I've never been this proud.
All right. Thank you for that, Deputy Prime Minister. To end the opening half, let's call Deputy Leader of Op. Here.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yup.
Okay. Okay. All right, panel. Hello.
Hello. You're not audible that much. Could you try to speak again?
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
It's a little bit choppy on my end.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, that's better.
Thank you very much. Okay, panel. Um, I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. So, panel, on today's debate about but I'm here to oppose that us as environmental activists should embrace climate change philanthropy or philanthropy towards climate change in any. So, panel, just to, uh, just to first of all give some rebuttals to what government um, member said. She basically came out and said that we should engage in philosophy because government has abandoned um, climate change infrastructure. And the reason behind now I'm here to here's how I'm going to climate change infrastructure. What's it called? Sorry. What's it called? Climate change groups have already been let down by the government time and time again. And the climate change groups are still working. We do not believe that it is in any way efficient for us to engage in climate change philanthropy when these groups have already without the help of parents. We believe that without the stance of any other citizens, whether it be private donor or whatever, these groups continue to engage in getting to the mission, which is obviously climate efficiency. And I believe that only right way to do this is to allow it what's it called infected by outside sources that would in any case want to shift the ideals towards one side. We believe that in any case engaging in climate change philanthropy would not be beneficial to climate change movement at large, and us as environmental activists should not engage in this sort of thing. As well, we want to talk about how the fact that we allow the biggest polluters in the status quo, how this would allow us basically give companies like Shell and Chevron the incentive or the go ahead to go on polluting. Essentially, what I'm trying to say here is when we engage in climate change, philanthropy or whatnot, maybe from these bigger companies such as Shell and Shell and Chevron or whatnot, in this scenario, we essentially give them moral back so they can essentially come ahead, say that, oh, we have already engaged trying to fix the government, fix the climate. So we don't actually have to take concrete steps into stopping what we are doing and ensuring that climate activity actually gets to a better level in what we are doing. Basically, we're giving them the moral and ability to essentially say, oh, I've already helped you guys leave me the fuck alone. This is essentially what we are doing when we engage collective climate philanthropic, essentially bribes from countries such as this, who would be in the place to actually give out these climate um, donations or whatnot. So essentially, we embolden them to go ahead, they can now cover themselves with the shield of, oh, already donated to this climate activity or whatnot. I believe that this is very, very problematic. That in this kind of world, not only does the climate change problems subsist, we have companies that essentially have no reason to stop doing what they're doing. But we have essentially given them the moral backing and we are collecting money from them. Whilst what they actually want to their that are due to this climate change because of what they but okay. As well, what's it called? I'm sorry. And also, we want to talk about the incentive to do this by these companies because we have to explain why it will be this kind of company that will essentially be collecting these climate philanthropic donations from. As we all believe that government essentially gave the reason as to why it will not be encouraging the incentive is there. As I explained in my former segment of my speech, the incentive to give out donations to this kind of climate, what do you call it, climate change organizations will be there. And what they want, and what all these bigger companies that want to continue polluting have always wanted, is the ability to not be judged for their pollutions. If they are being judged for their pollutions, they would not. They would basically they'll be on the hot seat as they are right now. So we believe that in our world where they are on the hot seat, and at least have a reason to shout at them as well. Oh shit, you are actually racist, whatever. They, these companies have big arms and they can essentially propagandize and say that, oh, we are already helping climate. And this is the incentive to continue what's it called to put money into these climate change, change facilities. It's basically the qualification donation, so they don't actually have to pay tax. These people are not paying the quote unquote tax basically by stopping what they're doing or stopping polluting by giving to a force or basically a donation to a climate change activity or climate change that will not substantially negate what they are doing on the company-wide side. Okay, so essentially, what do we get in our world that we don't get in our world? In our world, we get a society where currently we have the climate change um, movement going about their business and trying to negate the effect of climate change by going at all these bigger countries that happen to be things that are engaging in this climate change. And we are looking at of this to several research on what testing to happen. As our world are giving them as well in our world, and this basically means that we have validated them in doing what they are doing. As well in our world, have a world where even with the government backed organizations, even with government backing not being what it should be, at least we know that it is the government whom what's it called, whom we can potentially vote in and vote out would be what's it called? Would be the ones that are giving us this money, and we actually have an opportunity at least to get them out of power if they don't other climate action. Whereas to provide what we would consider essential services. And the reason why we want to go about them actually changing what they're doing and not shutting them down completely is because these companies are pretty much essential. So instead of trying to argue with the devil, we can at least try and bargain with a slightly less worse devil in that being the government and trying to get them to further their help into climate activity than trying to actually sign a deal with the devil, which is all these bigger companies that actually just play us, act, and use us to act as fool. They are going to use the climate change uh, board, climate change organization, essentially what are going to use climate change organization to essentially hide. And this kind of hidden deviousness is not something that we believe is profitable for the climate change society in general. Um, so I don't know how much time I have left. Um, I am pretty much done. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you for that, Deputy Leader of Op. Open the closing half. Let's call member of Gov. Here. You're not audible.
Okay, so let me just run a sound check. Am I audible, please?
You are.
Am I?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to be in the tech space. All right. So if you have a POI for me, please just like indicate it in the text space that you have a POI for me. I would be able to see it. All right. Um, am I clear on that, please? I hope like that's clear. Please POI via text. All right. I'm going to be looking at the channel and I'm going to be able to like handle your concerns there. So I'm going to be starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So panel, like there's been a major problem that has existed in today's debate from the opening half. The major contention you get is from a government side that says we need to reduce carbon emission to zero. We need to be able to create active social movement and ideological priority to be able to stop carbon, what they call environmental problems. And as a result, we need to be able to like get funding, okay, to be able to do that. And we think that this is like majorly done through funding. They say it gives things like targeted investment and all of that. But the contention it then gets from OO is we should not make this major. The reason why is because like these people who actually give this money or who donate to this movement are people who are causing this pollution. And as a result, it will not be justified to get that kind of money from them and then like ignore them of all of the other liabilities that they tend to own. So notice that if we are able to, as closing government, provide a better response to opening opposition on that for these polluters who would, give us money as environmental movement, we of course are going to win today's debate. We of course are going to win today's debate. But more importantly, when we show you the major problem that exists in today's debate, being the fact that we are trying to end an urgent problem, which is like climate changing and of itself, and show you first the most efficient way of solving the climate change problem in its urgent manner, and second, the most influential way, we already win today's debate. So like, let us get into it, right? First, my first argument will be on the idea of the money power symmetry. So the ICRC, for instance, today, the body of the Red Cross is independent and essentially they have a decentralized funding system. This is very important. So during the Yemeni war, for instance, they were tried to be lobbied by Russia and other Russia-related bodies to like not treat some particular people who were like fighting against like the against like the governments of Yemen in that sense and the rebels and all of those things. But ICRC was able to like stand against that oppression, and they were able to like not bow, because essentially Russia was not one of their major funders who donated to them. One, two, first, the fact that we currently have a situation whereby we have like permafrost, okay, like being defreezing in places like Siberia. And what this looks like is that you have carbon that have been trapped in the ground for like ions of years, by over thousands of years, right? Which essentially, due to global warming, are beginning to like melt. And the impact of that is that it's increasing the amount of carbon within the society today, such that in order to be able to like stop that, we need to be able to like fund researches. These researches look like, for instance, solar bouncing. What it does is that it reduces the amount of like solar rays that comes towards the earth by placing like mirrors around the planet Earth and all of these things, so that the heat that comes into the earth is reduced because it is bouncing off back to like the space, right? You have other things like climate clouding, which allows people to like put aerosol in the air, which helps to like make the ozone layer more clouded, so that the amount of sun rays that comes to earth is reduced. You have things like carbon trapping, whereby like emissions coming from like companies and all of those things are being trapped and reduced into smaller what they call into smaller pieces, so that they are not able to like harm the environment. These are like technologies that have been created to save the world, but essentially are not ones that have been able to be used yet, because there's a lack of funding to be able to like perform a perfect research to be able to solve this problem. What is the impact of this? It means that if at the end of the day, as an environmental movement, we are trying to solve like this climate change, and we're trying to use technology, engineering to be able to like solve these things, the only way we'll be able to perfect this research and eventually save our world is by getting money. Essentially, this means that even if we are going to do other things like, trying to stop these guys from like bringing emissions and all of that, they are not as important as a measure that allows us to like use the money that we get to be able to like fund this kind of research and eventually like solve our problems. So first, what you get from us is the importance of like the problem that exists within the status quo, how it is money that solves it. We win on that clash. Essentially, the comparative that then exists within our world is this. They say we have an oppressive system. These guys are polluters, they spoil the world, they bring out carbon emissions and all of these things. The moment they give us money, we'll no longer pressure them. But what this looks like is like saying, look, if one criminal, let's say Pablo Escobar, for instance, decides to like give the US government 2 million naira to fund its justice system, then if he actually comes to the US with the high level of like decent, justice system that exists guys actually still go out and do all of the bad things that they do. They'll be using to actually oppress us, even as environmental movement, we think that we're already creating an equal world that allows us to be able to compete on that ground and essentially like check their excesses. So within our world, you get first the ability to be able to like check the oppressive powers that exist within the status quo, because we can now lobby governments and place pressure on governments the way they do, and which is the way of the world. Secondly, you get the fact that the major problems that exist in like climate change, we're able to solve it because we fund research that are able to do all of those things. You are going to get like better analysis in the wave speech. Very, very proud to be closing government.
All right, cool. Thank you for that, member of Gov. Now let's call member of Op. Here.
Good afternoon. Can I be heard?
Yep, your
Okay. Very okay. So before I indicate that if you have POIs, I would prefer them in the text box too. So I will be paying attention to that. And once you mention your POI, I will be willing to take you. So I will be starting in 3, 2, 1, go. So, panel members of the House, first, there is a need to realize first and that in a world where we continually give room to perpetrators to carry out a farcical alleviation of the same problem that they actively contribute to, then we think that we allow them to play or put on the robes of sanctimonious hypocrisy, and basically we think that we also allow them to influence the policies that should actually prevent or take them out from continually perpetuating the evil that they are perpetuating. So it is first on that standpoint that we think that everything that has come from the side of the government doesn't stand into this debate. However, in order to carry out a more active and implicit or explicit rebuttal to whatever the government side has said, we'll be taking them on the following standpoints. First is their assertion of ideological purity. So we find that assertion quite funny and grounded in today's debate. First, because of the fact that when you think that you want to have ideological purity and you continually actively pursue for climate philanthropy, knowing fully well that in status quo, majority of the people who donate to these things are people who are what's the word? Are people who actively contribute environmental degradation, then we think that you automatically begin to sacrifice your ideological purity on the altar of financial gain. We are saying no to that in today's debate. Okay, so second, let's also mention the word that government has proposed, especially from the opening, is self-imploding. First, government goes ahead to say that the environmental movement in quotes, like basically that they should be more active, that the government is not doing anything. Yeah. Then they also go on to say that climate philanthropy would not prevent the government from taking actions. So we see how this is self-imploding, because at the end of the day, we're able to realize the word in status quo. If you claim that the government is actually not doing anything, as you have asserted from your end, and you go ahead to say that actively push climate philanthropy would not make the government lazy, then we think that's self-imploding, because we realize that based on status quo, in situations whereby the citizens are already willing or actively funding particular things that are supposed to be within the purview of government responsibility, and that the
POI.
government tends to take the back and begin to fold their arms. I'll take you in the next 30 seconds. Give me a few minutes. That the government begins to fold their arms. So, for example, we see what happened in Nigeria earlier this year when the government came out to say that the private citizens should focus on creating jobs and not look to the government to either create jobs or create an enabling environment for that. So we think that that is self-imploding from their end. Also, to the money argument, we need to understand the fact that money doesn't solve the problem in the context which has been painted by the government side. This is what it does. What money does is that it creates an endless vicious circles where polluters are continually allowed here to contribute to climate sustainability in quote, and able to get away. They're able to say, oh, after all, I'm putting in the money, since the money is what is providing the solution. And at the end of the day, they are not taking the necessary steps that they should take. Instead, what they are doing is they are fueling their sanctimonious hypocrisy and claiming that they are doing things that will help with environmental sustainability. Let's not also forget that in status quo, the research and all of these things that
POI.
has been that claimed to that will be funded by members and that by the government side is already being funded in status quo. So what do we see to that? We see that regardless of whether there is climate philanthropy or not, there would always be a self-existing structure whereby research will continually take place, whether by government or by private individuals. So shoot with your POI before I go into quickly.
Do you agree that
Quickly,
these guys
quickly.
who actually do you agree that anti-climate movers are able to do their work because they're influential? And second, in your world, how do you then stop these guys from doing these actions?
Okay, so thank you very much. I think one of the major mistakes we have made is thinking that our side totally opposes climate philanthropy. No, what we are saying, as the government has rightly framed, is we are opposing active climate philanthropy. And the government has rightly defined what active climate philanthropy looks like, which is the fact that they continually seek or pursue after sponsors and look for sponsors to basically help them. But what we are saying in our world, which we are going to attack much later in our debate, is that our world is one whereby we only accept philanthropic gestures on the basis of people believe in our movement, on the basis of people who think that our movement is worth investing in, not on the basis of sending letters or anything out to people who think that they have found a means to basically placate their conscience or refuse to carry out the right actions. So what are the reasons why we think that we do not support a society or one or a government that basically supports active climate philanthropy? First is the fact that we think it weakens this movement, and we have actively explained that. Why do we think it actively weakens this movement? We think it weakens them because of the fact that they are susceptible to being influenced by a lot of billionaires or whoever they are going to be receiving funding from, a lot of whom, yeah, are people who contribute to these things. So it means they're able to perpetrate and tell them that they should slow down with certain policies or they should slow down with certain pushbacks. And this is what it means. This is what it means is that they win from both sides of the ladder. So, or from both sides, from both ends. So they are able to influence anti-climate change people, yeah, and they're also able to effectively influence pro climate change movement. And at the end of the day, they are able to do what they're able to win at both sides, and we're able to we end up with a world that is not climate conscious. Also, there is a need to understand that in such world, what simply happens is that these people are usually distracted from the main goal. And what is the main goal? The main goal is ensuring that we pursue laws and policies and regulations and all of these things that help us to aspire towards environmental sustainability, and not a world where people are basically searching for sponsors at the expense of doing what is the right thing. Of course, we have already established the fact that it weakens the government, it makes them lazy. I'm sorry, I won't be able to take you. It makes them lazy and it prevents them from actually doing their duty, because they begin to shift the duty to the side of the philanthropists or to the private sector. And then let's also understand the fact that it fuels the throw the money at the problem syndrome. So what does this syndrome look like? This syndrome looks like a situation whereby there is a problem, and the automatic thinking on the mind of climate activists is that, oh, we need more sponsorship for these things, forgetting the fact that some of these problems could be solved by things as simple as ensuring that people do not litter their compounds, or people do not litter the streets, or the fact that people should use more environmentally friendly cars, or the fact that people should use gas instead of kerosene and some other fossil fuels and all of that. So we think that to the extent to which we have already been able to show that, in fact, what we need better is our laws and policies and not money. And of course, we have also been able to show that in the events where we need money, we do not totally reject climate philanthropy, but we say that putting it actively ahead of the main things that need to be done, then we are saying no to that. So what does our world look like? Our world looks like a world where people follow our ideologies because they are firm believers in it, and not a world where people are given the opportunity to subject our movement to their whims and caprices of hypocritical billionaires who think that giving out money to climate movements or anything would absolve them of the blame that they have in creating an environmentally degraded society. So what have we been able to do in today's debate? We have been able to first off trash the argument of the government side, and we have also been able to show how our side is better, in the sense that our movements are stronger. Our movements are able to act more independently because they are not influenced by foreign elements, and also the fact that governments are able to take better responsibility for their role rather than shifting it into the hands of the private sector. So it is on this role, on this basis, that we say that we are very much proud to oppose. Thank you very much.
Great. Cool. Thank you for that, member of let's call it a whip. Here.
Okay, so am I audible, please?
Yep.
Okay, so if you want to give me a POI once again, please type it in the text space. I'm going to be there so that I'll be able to attend to you when I ask for your POIs, right? So to be fair, right, I would not mind taking a POI from OO and CO if, of course, I have sufficient time to do that. All right, but let me immediately get into responses. So I'm going to be starting in 5, 4, Three, two, one. So, panel, you get like two good arguments from closing opposition and essentially the entirety of opposition today. They say that in the situation whereby you have a body of people who are donating to us as environmental movements, that if we say that we should not have an active what they call it, we should not be actively pushing for these things, is because these people actually fund us or who actually give us this money are the people who actually pollute. So they say that instead of us taking money from these guys that pollute and sort of like absorb them, that we should instead rather like go for other things like law policies, try to ensure that people believe in our movement and all of those things to like solve problems. Panel, like this is beautiful on the face of it, but we're going to show you why this lacks substance. First, all of these movements would have been very beautiful if we don't have an urgent problem in climate change. And I noticed how, like within the status quo today, with the problems like permafrost I told you about, with the likes of burning in Amazon's forest that exists within the status quo, with like of the California burnings and the ones that has happened in several parts of Los Angeles in the US and all of that, with high rise of like water, coming into and causing hurricanes in places like Philippines, with Hurricane Katrina all around the world and all of that, that we need a movement, we need a method that actively solves the problem of climate change as fast as possible. The reason why their arguments then fall flat is because when you talk about the likes of laws and policies, you need to get into like legislative measures, first reading, second reading, third reading, fourth reading, before you can actually even get these laws to actually work. First. Second, when you're trying to like get this whole idea of group of environment trying to tell people that this thing is actually true. Can't you see all the things? It's because the people fighting against this environmental movement and essentially like the parties who are called the pollution Nazi are a people who have been able to, by the value of capital and money and all of these things that they have, lobbying power and government that they have, being able to create a safe space for them to be able to perpetrate their works. Essentially, their ability to have capital, bringing revenue to the government, their ability to be able to lobby government because they have money has essentially been the reason why government has not even been effective in actually like making things work. We then think that to solve that problem would then be absurd to then imagine that, against this powerful funded enemy, what we should do is try to pressure government to just make laws or pressure government to just like, or try to convince people to believe in us and all of those things and eventually tell them to stop taking, dropping nylon on the floor and all of those things to solve a pressing climate change problem. We think that's like basically ridiculous, the fallout of today's debate. What then essentially like is the reason why we win today's debate? Let us take them at their best case. What they want is that they say they don't want these polluters and all of these guys to have a moral absorption. So they prefer laws and policies that stop these guys from taking this action. So what that looks like is they're going to tell Shell to stop its oil and gas move what they call it, emissions and all of those things instantly. What that would look like is like telling, carbon companies and factories in China to stop like emitting carbon and all of those things, because basically you don't get mechanics from them. So like, let us like take them at their best case. What that then looks like is when you try to clamp down on these companies, because you are trying to stop climate change, you create a more pressing problem. What does that look like? People who actually work within these companies, people who actually like generate, government that actually gets like taxes from these companies and essentially are beginning to shut down these companies in order to like ensure, climate change and, to cater to these environmental guys, essentially begin to create situations whereby because these companies begin to fold up, let's even imagine that they are successful, and this is taking them at their best case where they are being successful, right? You begin to create a situation whereby vulnerable people begin to lose their job. Those who work within that state, unemployment rates increase.
Yeah.
And essentially what happens is that poverty rates increase, and then you have a backlash from these people against the government. So like within their world, they are saying, stop these so-called guys who are like the major guys making this money by just collecting money from them. Instead, put laws that stops them and checks them. But what they fail to is that for you to be able to do so, you have to be able to do this in a progressive manner. And that is why like actively using money is important, because it ensures a lobbying system as powerful as they are to be able to like go against like, move against like movements that they'll make because they have all of those influences and all of those things. We think generally they create a ridiculous world within their world whereby you even have more poverty and more unemployment and even more backlash on government that you actually get from our world, whereby we essentially just get this funding and are able to like lobby government the same way these guys do and essentially ensure that at least we have an equal footing to be able to like tackle these guys and be better and all of that. I'm going to show you why like this is more likely to happen in our world. But before then, let me take a PY from CO. Quick retweet, please.
Okay. So basically, in your word, you keep on emphasizing funding from the same people who have been polluters. So when it follows that when you fail to continually fulfill demands in line with these guys, they withdraw funding, then your movement falls flat on its face, not for term of
Okay.
funding
All right.
under our own
So,
side, not
all
actively
right. So
engage.
panel, so this is the reason why like that argument falls on its face. Essentially, like this funding that we get from climate philanthropy is not only from guys who are bringing like oil and gas. The reason why we actually even like gave this argument or trying to take them was like to say even in the worst case scenario whereby we are getting money from these capitalists, we are using it to fund something that essentially helps us to be able to check this capitalist we win on that world. Essentially, there is a status quo that exists. And that was why, like, the argument that we made on the idea of the fact that it is more likely that our world exists shows that, for instance, from the likes of movement like Greta Thunberg's movement, the likes of the insulation activists in the UK and all of that, it shows generally that there is a general population that is beginning to believe in climate change, right? So what that means is that more people are likely to invest in this environmental movement as to before, so that you have fundings from several places. Even if this capitalists no longer fund us, like we are still going to have money. But essentially, that even if we are going to take money from these guys, because we use it in a system that allows us to actually solve the problem, a more pressing one that can only be solved by more. Notice how management gaps, urgency is debate. The alternative you get in the world does not urgently solve the problem. They fall out, right? Within our world, we're able to solve the problem because essentially, instead of being hypocritical as they claim to us, we're only being realistic, understanding that the world works in a particular way. And the only way to check the world in that way is to be able to like engage the world the way the world exists. We think a world whereby we gain power to lobby government, we gain power to like fund research, we gain power to like not create or absorb poverty rate and unemployment rate because we are trying to like stop these guys from like polluting the air and all of these things. And instead we're able to problem what you get from opposition. Very proud to be closing government.
All right. Thank you for that. Go now to end the debate. Let's call opposition whip. Here. Yep.
I'll take a POI leader. What ICG brought to this debate is that they emphasize the urgency of climate change, which we concede to. Climate change is like the crux of this debate, right? We are emphasizing on this debate what is best for one, the environmental movements, and two, what is best for the problem of climate change in itself, like attacking it. And they also emphasized on funds like needed to research and all of these things. What we are saying on our side of the house is that we do not like stop the process of research in itself. Like we can see in status quo, even research, like research is moving. It's not like we are going to stop all of these things on our own side of the house. And remember, the keyword is actively. So that means that we are still accepting funding, right? But we are not actively pushing for it because we do not want a greater evil on our own side of the house. So, right, what we are saying basically to this is that the idea
Take
of the matter
OG.
of urgency of climate change should not push us to self-destruction. Because if we actively accept these particular people, we are pushing ourselves to self-destruction and plunging ourselves into a greater like sea of problems, basically. If this, like, if the funds are actively collected, right, we ignore the problem that these particular people are like contributing. They are contributing to the problem of climate change. I've already explained that these people are investors in particular companies, in various companies, they are shareholders and all of these things. So they are indirectly contributing to it, whether we like it or not. And we have to consider that in the course of this debate, right? So we are saying that irrespective of all what like site CG has said, funding still exists on our own side of the house. So we do not like impede on research, we don't impede on all of these things.
Take
So
OG.
that makes that argument fall flat on its face. And then they went on to say that they
CG.
keep oppressive powers in yeah, yeah.
Okay, so
Instead,
the
I'll take you
reason
later. I'll
why
take you later.
climate.
They said
Okay, okay,
that.
okay.
Please stop. Please stop. Thank you very much. Yeah, they said that they keep oppressive powers in check, right? Because they can lobby the government. What we say is that this also exists on our own side of the house, right? Because we can see that the problem of climate change is a progressive problem, and country leaders are gradually rising to the occasion to like face this problem and tackle it head to head, right? So there are already international agreements that are like keeping leaders in check to make sure that they stick to the quota set for them and all of these things, right? We see that in COP, we see that with the UCFCCT and all of that. So basically, what you get on our side of the house, right, is a higher level of accountability, as explained by the member of opposition, right? Because the leaders are accountable. If we say that we are actively pushing for like funding from all of these climate philanthropies, we are leaving the leaders to just like dwindling their responsibilities and all of these things, because we know that funding is coming from the philanthropists, and whoever gives the funding calls the shots, basically. So what we are doing on our side of the house is that we are keeping in check these particular philanthropists who are obviously investors, influencers, and all of these things. We're keeping them in check so they don't become oppressive powers even within the movements in themselves. And we think that with that we win because of this faith
POI.
as regards ITG, right? So now, what do we like bring to the table generally on our side of the
POI.
house, on the opposition side of the house? We say that like we don't want a situation whereby in the process of battling against climate change, all these particular like government powers push funding in at become negligent and all of these things, because it encourages some sort of negligence and deflection in government
Take
responsibility,
OG.
right? So we don't want that on our own side of the house.
POI.
Please, like, please mute yourself, like, please, please, please. So yeah, like we do not want that on our own side of the house, right? Because the government has a very huge role to play compared to like the climate philanthropists, right? So if we actively like embrace climate philanthropy, we are empowering these philanthropists who do not necessarily like hold accountability to the masses, as opposed to the government, as mentioned by the MO, right? So we are just allowing the government to become lazy, and that's like the crux of the matter. We do not want that on our own side of the house. So that's why
Yeah.
we are not actively embracing the idea of climate philanthropy in itself, right? And we do not want a mentality whereby like, because the CG, like the side of CG, like they came to say that the idea is that we should push money in because like money is solving the problem and all that. We don't want this situation like that, right? We want mass action. We want them to lobby government, and these things happen on our own side of the house, right? These things like we still push for them on our own side of the house. We do not want a situation whereby these particular climate philanthropists call the shots, they push money into it, and then we can't talk when they're actively contributing, or when we find out that they're actively contributing and not just passively to the problem of climate change. So we think on this, sorry, yeah. Okay, so we think on this, like we win because of this base. So what we have done basically is to show you that it is not money is not just our problem as an environmental movement, right? We have other things that we need to face. So we have like on our own side, we are pushing mass action, we are pushing proper enforcement systems, we are pushing like government policies, all of these things mentioned by the member of opposition, right? Just to show that money is not necessarily the only problem we have to tackle with as an environmental movement in the process of battling climate change. So we think on this, we win on because of this debate. Why? Because we do this not just in the best interest of the movements in themselves, but we do this in the best interest of fighting the problem of climate change. So with this, we strongly oppose.
That member of opposition whip. So I think that ends the debate. Everyone, please cross the house and allow me a few time to prep my OA. Cross. All right. Hi. Um, just to confirm, is opening government here? Is
Yes.
opening government here? Okay, cool. How about opening opposition? Are you guys here? Is opening opposition here? All right, let's get back to them. Is closing gov here? I think closing government is also not here. So, how about closing up? Is closing up here?
Closing up is here.
Right, cool. Also, I think we're just waiting for opening opposition and closing gov. Is opening opposition here? Is opening opposition here? Hmm. Alright. So I'll set a timer for 5 minutes. If they haven't come, I guess I'll proceed on my way. I think opening gov also left there. Okay, I think opening opposition is here. I think we're waiting for cool. Alright, for the interest of time and like to avoid delays, I think like I'll just start. I think closing gov and OG will enter anymore. So yeah. Um, doing the OA then in three. Oh no. Mm, Alright. Doing my OA then in three, two. Wait, I think Venom is typing. Yeah, I'll just start. Cool. Starting my OA then in three, two, one. So my OA will go as follow. First, I'm going to give the standards that I use to assess the debate. Second would be the decision. Then thirdly would be the justification on why I arrived at call. So in terms of standards, I really have two. One would be in terms of depth of analysis. That means how well is the truth value of the material has been established. E.g., have you actually substantiated it with different layers? Or probably like did you analyze the incentive structure or at least mechanize the impact that you want to posit within the debate? But secondly would be also about engagement. So this looks like how strong the material is relative to the opposing house material, because debate is about engagement. That means this is about always comparison on both worlds, in which world is actually going to be better. And I feel like in this case, the main contention or the main clash point that happened within this round is like what should the environmental movement do in order to like forward the change that they actually want to posit within society to actually fight for climate change. So I feel like with that said, my decision is this. I gave the first place or 3 points to CO. I gave the second point to closing gov. I gave the first 1 point to CG. Then sadly would be CO. So I'll be dropping the decision here just for clarity. So let's engage then on why opening opposition gets the fourth in this debate. So I feel like one, opening opposition is a strong negative material, but I feel like there's an unclear comparative on why their side is actually going to be better. So they see that there's going to be like less accountability on government world, but there's a little lead work then on why their side is actually going to be better. Because if you look on both houses also concede that bad guys will still be bad guys either way, because like Shell and Chevron are still going to do what they actually want. But I feel like the comparative that government posits is that at least they get benefit from it in regards to technological innovation and financial donations that OG actually posited. But coming from CG as well,
Hello. I'm very sorry, please. Did the OA just start now? I wasn't in the room, please. I apologize. CG.
alright, cool. So I feel like I was comparing about why closing opposition gets the fourth. So I gave the call is in the text channel. So I give this a closing win. 3 points to CO, 2 points to CG, 1 point to OG, and 0 points to OO. So let me continue in my OA. So yep, cool. So basically, I feel like, yeah, again, on both houses, bad guys will still be bad guys. E.g., Shell and Chevron will still do what they actually want to do. That means like spilling oil or whatever. But at least coming from government side, they actually get a benefit out of it. So again, OG on the idea of technological innovation and financial donation. But coming from CG is that where they get research plus and like actually to create counter check and balance against anti-climate individuals that actually like harms the movement. So I feel like on that sense, there's already like exclusive delta coming from government bench. How did CO cool. Then what are the comparative that opening opposition tried to posit? Because like let's be charitable. So one, they see that they're going to expand other options. That means they're going to work on carbon emission, or like as climate change activists, they're like going to push forward different emissions and stuff like that. But I feel like it's unclear on why is that actually going to be effective, and like why is that actually exclusive in regards to like reducing the individual's carbon foot level at the end of the day. But then they say coming from DLO that we're like, instead of like opting to climate philanthropy, we're just going to engage in government like to help in climate battle, and like this is okay coming from opening opposition because they say that this is the lesser evil. But I feel like then if you want to actually argue that government are going to help, I feel like they need to debunk the framing coming from OG, because coming from OG they say that this government actually don't care, particularly coming from developing countries. Insofar, majority of the time, even if they're developed country, they always care in the economic interest. That means there's always an expense on environmental sustainability. So I feel like on that sense, it's unclear how effective is it actually going to be on opening opposition when they're going to like engage on government world. But then they say, I think this is a good thing, right? So they say that instead of actually being actively embracing philanthropy, they're still going to accept it. But then they're also like going to push narratives that they should play their part because they're still active polluters within the society. I feel like this is a good case. However, it's unclear how effective is it actually that these climate activists are going to like push forward and like push the narrative, and how these big players such as Shell and Chevron are actually going to curb on the demands of these environmental movements. So I feel like it's unclear in terms of mechanization and likelihood on what is a comparative of opening opposition actually wants to posit. Why then, despite that, CO takes the three compared to OO? Because I feel like CO is actually pretty smart when they say that they actually provided exclusive negative harm. So coming from closing opposition, they posited two things. One, they posited that at the point on which you're going to actively embrace climate philanthropy, you're going to be susceptible in terms you're going to weaken the movement, because now at the point at which corporations such as Shell are going to like engage, that means they can also perpetuate and like create pushbacks within the policies and within the movement in of itself. So I think in terms of acting more independently, closing opposition takes that on a comparative in comparison to OO. But secondly is that I feel like the opportunity cost argument as well. So like CEO argued that if we're going to actively embrace it, that means we're going to be distracted on the main goal, in particular to like lobbying policies. That means we're going to have a syndrome. But more than that, there's also going to be like automatic thinking that instead of actually engaging on government pushing them for accountability and responsibility, you're just like going to engage on more sponsorship, and like money won't actually solve the issue. So I feel like on that sense, closing opposition still outtakes opening opposition. So let's talk about then in terms of opening government and closing government. So why did closing government takes the second place over OG? I feel like the reason here are threefold. One, I feel like closing government was able to impact the arguments coming from OG, especially no innovation. So like I feel like opening government only stopped that at the point at which we're going to embrace climate philanthropy, we're going to have technological innovation, financial donation, and stuff like that. But I think it's unclear how is that actually going to help the climate environment, or like at least the environmental movement. So I feel like there should be more legwork on how this will actually impact the individuals on the ground. So I feel like it was only coming from CG when they actually talk about by funding research, we're going to create solar bouncing, climate clouding, carbon trapping, and stuff like that. And I feel like in terms of type of analysis, CG, I credited CG more than OG on that one. But the second reason why CG outweighs opening government is because I feel like closing government was able to present the meta value of their case. That means they also like prove why their case is important. Insofar they argued about urgency. That means coming from OG, I feel like it's unclear why should they actually care on their material at the end of the day, or like as an average reasonable person. But comparatively on CG, you were able to prove to me that as an average reasonable person, I should care on their impacts insofar like there's urgency, especially when fighting about climate change, and like it's going to affect all of us. But thirdly is like why closing government also outweighs opening government because of their extension in terms of counteract mechanism. That means on all the houses, there's always going to be like anti-climate activists. But if you actually give capital and money or funding to these environmental movements, they can actually create counter narratives to actually like dismantle or at least mitigate the harm of these individuals. So I feel like in terms of weighing as well, CG was able to prove that even on not on the grand scale of things that they've got actually like forward policies, but at least there's like an exclusive at least there's an exclusive benefit coming from CG that they can mitigate bad actors such as this anti-climate activists. So I feel like on that sense, CG takes OG. Then let's compare closing opposition over opening government. So the diagonal. So I feel like OG posits that there will be benefits, right? So they tell us two things. One, technological innovation again, and secondly would be the financial donation. And this is good because they can like support grassroots movements. How did CEO engage in this? I feel like twofold. One, CEO engaged in this by mitigating the harm. That means they can also accept gestures and people who believe on their movement actually get funding. That means they're able to actually like co-opt the innovation and donation, even if it's like small in scale. Donation is still there. So I feel like the benefit is not exclusive on OG. But secondly is that even if this is not true or you do not buy that claim, I feel like again there's a lack of impacting on OG on how these technological inventions will actually help advancing climate change. But secondly is that opening government also posit that they can actually have the ability to shift on politics, connection, and use. I feel like this is a good argument coming from OG when they say that, oh, if we're going to like engage with climate philanthropists, that means we can also use their influence, power, and money to actually like, forward climate policies and stuff like that. However, the question then becomes, who are these climate philanthropists that you're actually going to engage to? Since OG wasn't really able to debunk the framing coming from OO in regards to like these individuals are actually bad people, that means closing opposition material, particularly in the idea of setting pushback stands. This is why, or this is where their argument about if you're going to like if you're going to allow this philanthropists such as Challenge Everyone to participate, this is where pushback actually exists, and this harms the sustainability of the movement. So I feel like on that sense, it's also debunked on OG. But then CO also debunked on the idea that framing does not care. So I feel like this was the missing link coming from OO and CO. So OO never proved why actually the government is actually going to care on their side. Comparatively on CO, they were able to prove this by saying that, you know what, states actually care about this, e.g., there's an existence of international agreements doing their responsibility or at least their quotas. That means governments still care because they need to uphold in terms of international legitimacy and stuff like that. So I feel like on that sense, closing opposition wins over opening government. But lastly, then let's compare closing benches. So why then CO is better than CG? I feel like one, the weighing of closing government in regards to urgency is good, but CG wasn't able to actually prove the sustainability of the movement insofar they haven't debunked the weakens the movement case coming from CO. That means it still stands. That sure, probably you're going to create research right now in the present, but what about in the next 5 years? And like, what about the effectivity of the urgency that closing government that actually wants to enter in this debate? But two, even if this is not true, that urgency is actually there, I feel like closing opposition was able to hijack the case of OO in regards to lack of accountability. That means at the point at which you actively embrace climate philanthropy, what's going to happen is that there's going to be a complacent state, and that's going to be harmful because now they're not actually fulfilling their mandate, and that's just going to like be there's going to be trickle down effects and stuff like that. So I feel like on that sense, closing government then has the burden to actually prove why the capital on climate philanthropy will be enough for the long term as well. But even if you do not buy that, I feel like another reason why closing opposition wins over closing government is because they wasn't able to debunk the idea on how it harms the internal movement. E.g., at the point at which you're going to actively embrace climate philanthropy, what's going to happen is that you're going to sacrifice the movement's identity, and like that's harmful because this is where you breed fractionization and like on the idea as well on the stability of the movement as a whole. So I feel like on that sense, sure, probably urgency is good, but I feel like the movement is more important because we're talking about environmental movement within the debate. So I feel like with all those reasons, my decision stands. If you have any questions or personal comments, you can like freely message me in Discord and I'm happy up to attend you. Cool. Good luck on your next rounds as well.